the top, so how you feeling down there? Where did you think you could go? 'Cause everyone already knows it's 20 to 1. Yeah, so you better run. You got the world on its knees. You're taking all that you please. You want more, but you get nothing from me. You like the burden we bear. You love the hate that we share. You want more, but you get nothing from me. But it lasts.
What up? It's your boy TV Reaction. Today is Wrestling Reaction or Wrestling Wednesday. If it's get up by Wednesday, so we're going to check out another video from Wrestling Andy. This is a stem from a video he released earlier as well too, though. Now this one is about babyfaces, but this is where I always like to call it Wrestling Bizarre World, where babyfaces that fans hated. Something I never understood about wrestling is the backward, bizarre world mindset of it as well too, though. You got where the babyface, as you know, regularly the faces are supposed to be loved, cheered by the fans, while the heels get booed or anything. But sadly, there's been time where it's vice versa, where the heels are loved and the babyfaces are hated. And we dealt with a lot of that, especially in 2010 of wrestling, especially in WWE, with the likes of John Cena and Roman Reigns' first run as a babyface as well too, as well as many others, and well, include some most recent one. This was made 10 days ago before the SmackDown World was title, because right now I don't know, because the international crowd as well too. Cody got a couple boos. Hopefully is fine. Danny back in the States as well too. Hopefully we don't go through whole lot of Hill Cody. And even recently other commotion like not WWE's new partner Triple A with Vikingo, and now he officially turned heel, embracing and turn heel as well too, though. But we dealt a lot some of that even in the past as well too, though. So we're gonna look at what I call the Bizarre World Wrestling, babyface that fans sadly hated. Anyway, without further ado, let's get it.
One of the most basic things a wrestling company hopes to achieve is getting the babyfaces cheered and the heels booed. After all,
as it's supposed to be.
This is a form of entertainment centered around morality plays where we want to get behind a hero as they take on a villain.
Yes.
But sometimes this doesn't work out, and the performer a booker hopes will be treated like a good guy ends up getting treated like a villain instead. And it's those people we're going to be looking at today, starting with perhaps the most famous modern example.
Oh yeah, just where it started. I don't care how much it's explained. To this day, I never understood this. I never understood it. This was people, and the reason why, and I hate about this is that this is the reason why we got a Den Hill Tribal Chief Roman as well too. I feel like the whole Hill run, the long title reign, all that, and the second Reign of Terror, pun intended, was because it was a big apology for the bad booking that sadly got him booed, and the asshole fans booing him over the booking as well too. The reason I say that, because a lot of people say that Triple H's Reign of Terror was valid because of what happened with the current call. So I feel like this is why we dealt with it for 4 fucking years, because of this shit right here. And the booking, and especially in the nail couple, is that dog food bullshit between that feud with him and Baron Corbin.
Example of such a phenomenon, Roman Reigns. Yes, while today he's accepted by audiences as one of the biggest stars in wrestling and one of WWE's top babyfaces.
You know, I hate it. I'm glad he's a babyface now, but I hate how this was before he was a heel. Hated hero, love villain. I hate that backward, bizarre term right there. But now he's a miss hero. At least he finally got the babyface run that they've been longing for him for the longest time. Hopefully he stays for a good minute.
That was not always the case for Roman Reigns. No, as anyone who was around for his early pre-Tribal Chief run will tell you, the mid to late 2010s were a dark period for the Florida native. Why was that? Well, despite being pushed as the next face of the company here, the babyface heir apparent to John Cena, fans did not take to the idea when it was presented to them. No, while Roman certainly had a lot of potential back in 2015, especially as he'd just come off a run as part of The Shield alongside Jon Moxley and Seth Rollins, there was a sense that his ability to achieve this potential still wasn't there yet.
The fact that he said called him Moxley here and then it slipped up in other promos as well too. I got a feeling the day Moxley ever go back to WWE, he's gonna go by Moxley. I mean, Matt Cardona did it, but so here's that.
And the reason for this was because he was still very green, way greener than either of his two stablemates. So because of that, once it became clear to audiences that the big dog was going to be pushed to the top of the card whether they liked it or not, fans started rebelling against the booking, with the worst incidents of this perhaps...
Oh yeah, man. I remember being there, man. I felt so bad for him. I was confused and felt so bad that he got booed. Even Rock couldn't help. That sucked right there, yo. And that's why I was initially going to give him his heel turn pass, but you know the story about some folks I'm back in the group, but that damn group that tried to call me heelish for doing that shit. Now that's why I don't root for heels at all. Won't even give certain roles a chance. Because if that would happen, I'd probably give her business a chance. I may even give Naomi a chance as well too, but because of that BS right there, is reasonable. I mean, I could possibly give Homelander Hill Cody a chance, but because of that BS right there, nobody gets a damn chance.
Being at the 2015 Royal Rumble where, upon winning the titular match, Reigns was aggressively booed out of the building.
So sorry.
Seriously, outside of maybe the Yes Movement, this was probably the biggest incidence of audience backlash in recent memory. And it saw Roman turn into public enemy number one for a few years there. No matter what he or Vince McMahon did, fans weren't interested in getting behind him. But then to be fair, all that anger wasn't fully being directed toward the future head of the table here. No, come the late 2010s, he'd become something of an avatar for the boss's booking in general, a symbol of all the frustrations that were out there in the ether surrounding the general direction of the company. Thankfully, though, he would eventually turn things around in 2020 when he turned heel and began his run with the Bloodline, the group largely responsible for WWE's wave of increased popularity in the early 2020s. But while this was happening for him, elsewhere in AAA, another babyface was suffering the same fate.
Yeah. I didn't know what the hell was going on. They explained it. And what's worse about it, the heel that get more love than him, aside for the dickhead back there, Dom, is Alberto Del Rio, or El Patron, whatever his name, or I call him Abuser Del Rio. And we got started because you know his history, you know the history of Alberto Del Rio with his controversy, and they still love him regardless of that. That's what confusion right there. So yeah, and then other people, the reason why I say they heel because they felt like, I don't know, some reason Viking was, well, he probably gonna tell the story, but some people saying that Viking was sold out, some shit like that, or he came to corporate. I don't know, but you know, eventually he went into his heel turn, but still.
Made as Roman had before, a babyface by the name of Vikingo. Now, we know that during his appearances in the United States for a while there, Vikingo was a very popular figure with fans, especially when he had that brief run.
That's why I was so confused.
AEW as part of the working relationship Tony Khan shared with Conan at the time. But one thing which has often been true is that the US and Mexican audiences are very different animals. So while the Puebla native was treated like a hero north of the border, south of the border in his homeland, he was not welcomed so readily, as there he was seen as a bit of a Roman Reigns-like figure, a pretty boy who was being pushed to the moon by the booker, whether fans wanted it or not. And that feeling of rejection surrounding Vikingo would only get worse in 2025, as this was the point the WWE purchased AAA. Obviously then, seeing how popular the babyface star was in America, Triple H and company immediately began pushing him as the guy, quickly having him win the Mega Championship from Alberto Del Rio. But this ended up backfiring in the end because, with a part of the AAA fan base being upset over the idea of a larger company swooping in and buying out their wrestling promotion, the idea that Vikingo was being presented as the TKO poster boy only made him even more disliked.
Sad.
So bad did things get here, in fact, Alberto Del Rio, of all people, would somehow turn into the spiritual babyface.
Exactly. Exactly. Knowing that this dude is low-key a piece of shit, they're behind this guy. Yeah.
Situation, as that audience saw him as a man who'd been wronged by getting both his title and his job taken away from him. Needless to say then, for things to have gone this far, the heat on the supposed face had to be unreal. And this has continued to be the case during subsequent AAA shows in 2025, to the point that even Dominic Mysterio would be cheered ahead of Vikingo and would be treated like the actual hometown hero during their match together. But let's move away from AAA for now and back over to WWE again, as it was also in 2025, or at least during its early months, that our next entry found themselves getting booed despite being a face. That's right, it's time for...
Yeah. Now this one I can slightly understand, but thank God they slightly understand, but thank God they fixed it by pairing her with Alexa Bliss, but that's still babyface. But still, reason why, you know, there was about her getting into the title pictures role too, though. Even the point that they was going to cheer last year, before, I don't know, last year, whatever, when she went against Rhea, they cheered Rhea more, and at the time Rhea was a heel, and then more than her though. And the folks was coming at me like wanted me, because I wanted to come at me for wanting to root for her instead of Rhea. I'm like, I'm not gonna root for anybody. So yeah, there's that.
For us to talk about Charlotte Flair.
Play safe.
What happened here? Well, after taking a sabbatical away from the ring throughout 2024 in order to deal with both an injury and her real-life divorce from Andrade El Idolo, Charlotte Flair returned to WWE during the Women's Royal Rumble match at the titular pay-per-view on February 1st of 2025. And there she played out...
Oh, that's right. She ended up turning heel against Tiffany Stratton. Thank God. That's the other thing, too.
The fairy tale story of her going on to win the whole thing as she booked herself a world title shot at WrestleMania 41. Unfortunately, though, while the story being presented here certainly had the daughter of Ric Flair be a babyface in theory, in practice, this was not the way audiences saw it, and that led to them quickly booing her. Why had fans turned on Charlotte so readily? Well, by then it had become a bit of a running joke that whenever the Queen took some time away from the ring, her status as the daughter of a legend would always see her get a title shot immediately upon her return, with some fans even joking that this was her cashing in her Charlotte in the Bank contract. And on top of that, her character has always been more of a natural heel one anyway, so it was hard to get people to cheer for her at the best of times. And this all came together to create a situation where, no matter what Flair did in early 2025, no one was buying her as the hero in the situation. Really, it wouldn't be until later on that year that things finally turned around for her, with this largely being attributed to a Players Tribune article she put out in which she discussed her divorce, her confidence issues, and the misconceptions about who she really was. That article was enough to humanize her with the audience at large and make people start to look at her on-screen character a little differently. And then, of course, there was her odd couple on-screen pairing with Alexa Bliss around the same time, something which added some more layers to her gimmick and made her come across as more than just a cold and calculating ice queen. Basically, what we're saying here is that considering how public perception of her has changed as of late, we don't imagine Charlotte Flair will be getting booed for a while, at least not unless she turns heel, and those boos are coming by design.
Of course.
So it looks like she's finally turned a corner in that sense. But what about our next subject? Could the same be said of them? Did they manage to overcome those early boos?
Oh, man. This one. The original work. Here's the thing with this. I feel like Vince didn't know what to do him then. Because if you look at his Flex Kavana character in USWA, was like the original NXT, whatever, like at the time for WWF at the time, he actually had the Rock persona there, but he was a babyface. So there's that. So I wasn't sure why they didn't bring the Flex Kavana character up and gave him whatever the gimmick he had coming in as well too. But then, and then the fans, you know, just like Roman, treated him the same way too, but worse.
Well, let's find out by looking at them now. The man known back then as Rocky Maivia. Yes, Roman Reigns isn't the only member of the NYE family who was booed early on in their career, despite them being a babyface on paper. No, decades before the tribal chief had to deal with this, his older cousin Dwayne Johnson would be doing the same. And for Dwayne, it would all start when he joined WWF in late 1996 under the name of Rocky Maivia, a combination of the names of his grandfather Peter Maivia and his father Rocky Johnson, with it being here that almost immediately after his debut, audiences widely started rejecting him. How could someone as legendary as The Rock get turned on by fans like this? Well, back then he wasn't The Rock yet. No, this was before the People's Champion had unlocked that side of his character and morphed into the coolest guy inside of a wrestling ring. What he was here instead was a very green rookie, someone who could be described as a blue chipper and whose character basically consisted of a very forced-looking smile, an aw shucks promo style, and a terrible 90s haircut. So it's easy to see why fans turned on him then, particularly as this was right at the same time as Stone Cold Steve Austin was rising to prominence and making anyone who wasn't an anti-authority badass feel like the lamest person in existence. So bad did things get for Rocky during 1997, in fact. At one point, fans would infamously start bringing signs to shows which read, "Die, Rocky, die," or "The Rocky Thee" if you're German. And that was the catalyst for him turning things around, in fact, as it was after he turned heel and morphed into The Rock that he truly started to get over. That's right, this was where the Great One's personality was finally able to shine in full. And once that happened, it would be less than a year before he turned babyface again, and about a year before he'd become WWF champion for the first time at just 27 years old. Of course, not everyone can be The Rock, though.
Of course.
No, someone with that level of star power and charisma only comes along once in a generation, or if you're talking about the Attitude Era, twice in a generation. But for others, though, getting cheered after the Boo Birds have begun can be a major struggle. And this was something our next subject found out all too well when they returned to the ring in 2014, right in the midst of the ascent of an all-time legend. Who are we talking about here? Why, Batista, of course.
Or Bautista.
Okay, to tell the story of this one, we're going to have to...
Now, this one, I can understand. It was the wrong time. We was so behind there, Brian, that Batista ran the Royal Rumble or anything. It was like, come on, yo. We worked this hard for damn body to get pushed. That he's not gonna get pushed aside like that. To the point that even Roman Reigns was getting cheered at the time against, because it was him and Batista was like the last two there. Roman Reigns was getting heavily cheered at the time as well too. This, well, you know, it's like before the whole hating on Roman thing. Roman was getting cheered loud enough to beat Batista in the Royal Rumble, and he lost, and he ended up becoming, and Batista becoming Bautista. Yeah.
Tell the story of Daniel Bryan. Back in 2013 and 2014, the American Dragon was the hottest thing in the entire wrestling industry, with this happening after he got hugely over with fans in spite of Vince McMahon's desire to only push him to a mid-card level. Seriously, the fight between the boss and his audience got so intense here that come the early weeks of 2014, the idea that Bryan would not win the Royal Rumble and go on to main event WrestleMania 30 seemed like madness.
Right.
It would have been like if Vince had refused to push Steve Austin in 1998, and fans were quick to let him know this on a regular basis. But in the boss's mind, this didn't matter because he had bigger plans for the showcase.
And he was losing his mind because he was getting old.
Of the Immortals that year. Plans which involved the return of one of the Ruthless Aggression era's biggest legends. You see, by that point, after having exited WWE a few years prior in order to focus on an acting career, Dave Batista had made a deal to return to the promotion as an entrant in the annual 30-man Battle Royal. And not just that, no, the plan here was for Big Dave to go on and win that match, then from there face Randy Orton in the main event of WrestleMania. Obviously then, the issue was simple. If Batista was winning the Royal Rumble, it meant Daniel Bryan wasn't.
Right.
And in 2014, that was enough to make the DC native the biggest heel on the roster, despite the fact he was supposed to be the good guy in the whole situation. So it was then that as he stood there in the middle of the ring that night, the ultimate winner of the bout, fans rained down jeers upon Dave. Could he turn things around? Not during this run, no. Rather, all Batista could do in 2014 was turn heel and remain in that spot until he left the company again in late spring. Still, at least when he eventually got to come back for his retirement match against Triple H a few years later, audiences would be ready to get behind him again. That's right, there are cases where all it takes is time for an audience opinions on a performer to soften. And if you need another perfect example of this, you need only look toward our next subject. Someone who, despite being a babyface, was booed mercilessly for
and this one I didn't understand for a while either.
years, John Cena.
Come on now. Even more so than Roman Reigns, John Cena might be the poster boy for a babyface getting booed by crowds. How did it all happen in his case?
That's serious.
Well, after getting very over during the early 2000s with his heel Doctor of Thugonomics character, the West Newbury native suddenly found himself being thrust into the position of being WWE's next top star, effectively replacing Stone Cold Steve Austin in the role. The only problem with this, though, was once Vince McMahon had decided John was going to fill that spot, he felt the need to take away his edgier Doctor of Thugonomics character and instead transform him into the more child-friendly purveyor of hustle, loyalty, and respect. As you would expect then, while this led to Cena continuing to be a hit with many kids in the audience, a large percentage of the adult male fan base turned on him, as to them, this was not the guy they'd originally signed up to see on top. No, what this represented to them was a regression in not just his gimmick, but also in the direction of the company itself, as it was a step back towards something like the New Generation era. Basically, it felt like it was undoing a lot of what the Attitude Era had done for WWF in terms of making it a more timely product. So because of all that, Big Match John became the biggest villain in all of WWE, right at the same time as he was portraying its biggest hero.
Yeah.
Seriously, watch any WWE show here, and you were bound to see the champ getting booed out of buildings, with the most famous examples of this probably coming at events like One Night Stand 2006 and Money in the Bank 2011. Hell, this would continue pretty much up until 2014, at which point John entered the beloved legend phase of his career, and so no one could bring themselves to jeer him anymore.
Right.
So much would this be the case by then, in fact, once Cena actually turned heel again in 2025, one of the bigger issues with that whole run was the fact that no one wanted to boo him anymore. One-person fans would have no problem booing only a few years.
Oh, yeah. They botched her whole routine. They should have kept the whole Southern Belle character they had for her as well too. She got over as a baby face with that when she went facing one time. This whole little, I know she has a military background, but they could have left that alone.
Prior to this, however, would be our next subject, someone who ended up in such a position largely on account of erratic booking, leading to fans to not know how to feel about her anymore.
Right.
The woman known to the wrestling world as Lacey Evans. Now, Lacey Evans is a curious one because, while the reason we just mentioned was a big one when it came to her getting booed by fans in the spring and summer of 2022, it was far from the only one. Now, aside from that, there was also the fact that her character had never really been a babyface-friendly one, what with it being largely built around the fact she was an elitist Southern belle who looked down on those she viewed as being beneath her. So strong did that resonate with WWE fans, in fact, when it came time to change things up for her, a lot of that residual heat remained. But even if this hadn't been the case, there would likely still have been a lot of the same issues with her getting booed anyway. And we say that because, despite her new character at this point in time playing off of her real-life military background, something which was supposed to position her in more of an American hero light as a soldier who had served her country, it was impossible to get invested in her as a hero here. Why was that? Well, those initial vignettes introducing...
Yeah, them vignettes did not help at all. They did not help at all. They should have left that at her just draining and bring her out there. And the vignettes did not help her. I get it, but at the same time, it came off...
This new incarnation of Lacey Evans would show her as the good guy. Once she eventually re-debuted in the ring, she'd inexplicably be cast as a heel again. And that just made the whole thing confusing. Confusing enough to where, once she was shifted over to SmackDown soon thereafter and turned babyface again, fans didn't know how to respond. Now, as far as they could see, it was impossible to cheer for someone who had been flipped around the alignment chart so readily in the weeks prior.
Big show.
Hell, if that audience had decided to get behind the Georgia native in that moment, there was a pretty good chance they'd be rewarded with yet another heel turn a few more weeks down the line. So rather than do this, live crowds just continued to boo Lacey, and that pretty much killed off any hopes she had of getting this character over. But let's move away from the ladies for now and back over to the men again, as it's there we find our next subject. A man who back in early 1997 was also struggling to get cheered, despite being the perennial babyface, Bret Hitman.
Now that I did not know. I knew eventually the double turn happened, but I didn't know it's because he was starting getting booed. I thought just because Austin was a little slightly getting better and then a little popular, and they was slightly getting cheered, and then they just went with a double turn as well too. I'm glad he did, but at the same time, I didn't know he was actually getting booed. That sucks.
And Hart. Now, we know that for the majority of 1997, Bret Hart was a heel. Or at least he was a heel in the same way that 2023 Drew McIntyre and 2024 Hangman Adam Page were. And we say this because this was the period he went through his run of being an incredibly justified villain. So much so that he'd...
Another term I hate, justified villain. I hate that term, yo. Because there's no excuse to be a villain.
continue to be cheered everywhere outside of the United States, particularly in his home country of Canada. What we're talking about here, though, comes before that, a period which happened during the early months of the year. Why are we talking about this period? Well, because this was when the Hitman was still supposed to be the babyface in America, too. But then, why wouldn't he be presented this way, as he represented everything a hero had been in WWF up until then? Good, virtuous, and always fighting for the right thing. The only problem with that, though, was it coincided with the rise of Stone Cold Steve Austin, a heel on the face of things who was quickly becoming beloved by audiences on account of his rebellious anti-hero antics. Hell, this was the entire basis of the feud between the two parties, as Bret saw the fans turning on him as evidence of a degradation of society, a degradation which was being pushed along by the Rattlesnake. And so for that reason, he gradually began to resent the American fan base for the way they were treating him. Of course, all of this would lead to Bret challenging Austin to a submission match at WrestleMania 13 so that he could expose his rival for the fraud he was by making him give up in the middle of the ring. And when Steve refused to give up here, it led to...
Okay, sir. So everyone's talking about the double. They are talking about the double turn. Okay, that makes sense then. I thought maybe he again, but before that, I know he had a little snap. He was snapping a roll. Frustrating. That's not the goddamn word for it. This is bullshit. The way he used, he got the only person I know in wrestling that improvised the word shit. You don't like it, tough shit. But still, so they talk about the double turn. Okay, that's different then. That makes sense. I thought maybe, and of course you know that probably when he did snap, right? But they were still booing Austin in the way where it was that got dubbed over, but still.
The best double turn in wrestling history, as from there, Stone Cold became the official babyface and Hart the official heel, at least in the US.
Keyword official. And thank you for, again, verifying that, because there's folks who like to thwart that double turn, saying that either his one thing is Austin then turned face, he became a likable heel, or Bret Hart didn't turn heel, the audience turned heel. Like, certain fans can be ridiculous just to get people on their dark side. It's sad.
So really, in that sense, fans turning on the Hitman when he was still supposed to be the babyface worked out for the best here, as it gave us an all-timer of a match and eventually led to Steve Austin catapulting WWF towards levels of mainstream success they hadn't even seen in the 80s.
Yup.
But what of an at-one-time rival of Bret Hart's? Someone who also stood for everything that was good and true.
Yeah.
Someone whose peak actually happened during the late 70s and early 80s. Was he turned on by a portion of crowds during that time too, despite this being long before the era of the anti-hero? Why, yes he was, as well as during the early 90s too. And that's why he's our next subject, Bob Backlund. Okay, to tell the full story of Bob Backlund, we're going to have to go back to that pre-Vince McMahon Jr. era, when the company then known as the Worldwide Wrestling Federation was being run by Vince McMahon Sr. It was he who, after Bruno Sammartino finally decided to call it a day as the top dog in WWF Once and For All in 1978, booked a then relative rookie by the name of Bob Backlund to be his next top star. The only problem with this, though, was that while Bob certainly was successful as a champion in terms of being a draw, and while he certainly had a portion of the fan base behind him, his aw shucks Midwestern babyface gimmick never had any of the same excitement to it that Bruno Sammartino's had before him. No, well, Bruno was in many ways a walking mass of charisma, and while the heel who succeeded him, superstar Billy Graham, was even more charismatic, Backlund felt very much like a character ripped out of Happy Days or Back to the Future.
Oh.
We don't want to say he was boring exactly, but let's just say he was less Marvel comics and more Archie comics.
Wow.
Basically, he was a walking stereotype of the white picket fence 1950s. And during the late 70s and early 80s, this wasn't exactly the coolest thing out there.
Wow.
So it was then that once Vince McMahon Jr. took over the promotion in 1982 and began the process of going national, Bob would not be the guy he saw as his top star. No, he had another person in mind altogether.
Oh, yeah.
A live-action cartoon character by the name of Hulk Hogan.
Hulk Hogan.
And that led to a situation where, after dropping the WWF World title to the Iron Sheik in late 1983, Backlund would largely disappear from the promotion, with him not having another prominent spot there again until the New Generation era. And when he came back at this point, despite early ideas being for him to be pushed as a legend-level babyface again, he'd eventually be forced to turn heel as a result of the fact fans had even less interest in that old gimmick during the mid-90s. Of course, in the mid-90s, it wasn't like a lot of people were even watching WWF anymore to get bored by Backlund as a babyface. No, by that point, the hot new thing for fans in the know was being presented over in Philadelphia in the form of Extreme Championship Wrestling. And it's there our next subject first cut his teeth as it happened, a man who had to go through a widely rejected initial babyface run before he became the innovator of violence.
Oh.
Who are we talking about this time?
Tommy
Who else
Dreamer.
but Tommy
Well, look
Dreamer.
at him back in the day.
Yes, well,
I know
it's
this
easy
one,
to think
but
of Tommy Dreamer as being the heart and soul of ECW
Wow.
today. That was not the case when he first arrived there
Wow.
in 1993. No, back then, believe it or not, he was considered to be too much of a pretty boy babyface for the hardcore Philly faithful. Basically, the best comparison would be he was to ECW what John Cena was to
What's that? What the fuck his name is? Pretty boy Floyd, Pretty Floyd, whatever his name is. Hold on, go back. Is that Floyd? Oh, his name was WF Floyd. Hold up, was that who that was? I can't forget his name. This name was nah. Oh god, not. His name is Pretty Boy Floyd. Was that his name? I try to remember that. Nah, it wasn't him, but his name was something like Pretty Boy Floyd, something like that. Freddie Joe Floyd. Yup, that's who that was. I think that was Freddie Joe. Yup. No, that's Tracy Smother. Oh, that's Tracy Smother. It was the other one. He was Freddie Joe Floyd. Who's the other one? Oh, I can't think of that. Yeah, somebody had to comment that now. He was the guy that Tommy Dreamer was tagging with. He was on WF as a long time jobber, just like Tommy Smother. So was Freddie Joe Floyd. Who is? All right, give me a second. Yeah, I found it. That's Salvatore Sincere. Yeah. So I had to look up Tommy Dreamer. He was known as Giant Gun right there. Yes, Salvatore Sincere. That's who that was. Yup. That's who that is. Yup. Yeah. Yup. Thank you. Yeah, I was working my brain like who's that with Tommy Jr. Yeah, he's known as Johnny Gunn, but yeah, Salvatore Sincere. Yup. Anyway, let's keep going.
to WWE for much of his run there.
Back with Taz wrestling barefooted as a Tasmanian Devil.
And this meant that even if Paul Heyman wanted him to be a top hero for the promotion, the audience was having none of it.
Of course.
So what turned things around for the New Yorker then? Well, in order to win the respect of the crowd in the 2300 arena, Dreamer would have to show how hardcore he could get. And the way he would do that would be via a legendary feud with the Sandman. What happened during this feud exactly? Well, after losing to his rival in one notable encounter, as per the pre-match stipulation, Tommy would have to take 10 lashes to the back with a Singapore cane. But while many would have complained about this, the innovator of violence actually embraced it, even asking for more of a beating at one point. And because it's impossible to fake a Singapore cane shot to the back, it meant everyone knew exactly how much this was hurting him, with that gaining him a whole...
So he kind of like was like the early, like how Austin got sympathy for the that's obvious how they could shoot that double turn, because he was had his never give up kind of when he's bleeding and all as well too. Like that's how he really fully gained respect for the fans right there. But yeah, so this kind of in a way like that. Nice
new measure of respect from the audience. That's right, like with Steve Austin in early 1997 WWF, Tommy Dreamer was able to get over as a babyface by losing and being presented as someone who wasn't afraid to take his licks for the overall good of the story being told. And once he'd done that, he'd remain hugely over for the rest of his time with the promotion. Hell, even when ECW went under in 2001, he'd remain a star in places like TNA and, to a lesser extent, WWE.
Crazy thing, like, he probably was like low-key, could have been like the flair of ECW in a way, you know. I think the only time he was hailed because of the evasion is the evasion. That's probably the only time he'd have been hailed was the evasion.
So this certainly was the best career move he could have possibly made back in 1994. But let's flash forward away from that for now, and back to a more modern-day WWE again, as it's there, during the late 2010s, that our next subject enters the fray.
Now this one, W's understandable. he should have never. He again. Got love for Shane, and I respect out of all the people that's like supposed to be not a wrestler that do the stuff he did get hella respect. But at the time, like it wasn't the right time for that.
Another person who was being pushed as a babyface but was being met with widespread rejection by fans, none other than Shane McMahon.
Of course.
Now this is one which isn't as talked about as others in today's video, but it's certainly one which bears being discussed, as while many won't remember it today on account of it coming during a particularly dark time for WWE. Back in 2018, there was an attempt to push Shane McMahon as a babyface. Hell, he was supposed to be the babyface boss of SmackDown here, in the process at times.
Well, because of that, between most of the members of the McMahon, Shane actually could pull a babyface. Is like out of all the McMahon, he hasn't been the better babyface character out of all the McMahons. You know what I mean, granted, Easton had babyface run. I mean, of course, Linda does not really done much as well too. Excuse me. I mean, Stephanie had a good little babyface run with the SmackDown GM thing going on as well too, and then the feud with Sable was pretty good, but nothing as great as Shane. Shane had some good moments as a babyface. Especially his feud with Kane, but around this time, it was the wrong time. That's all it was.
As a counterpoint to the role his sister had over on Raw. And that all did work up until the point he got in the ring, of course. You see, Shane McMahon has always been an over character, and while he can certainly produce a spectacle when he's asked to occasionally step into the ring, he's not a great wrestler in the sense that someone like a Bryan Danielson or a Gunther are great wrestlers. And this meant that when he went to Saudi Arabia to win the Best in the World tournament...
Yeah, that was the worst thing they could have done. And think about it. The tournament was already not great because it barely had any international wrestlers in the tournament. That's the other thing that sucked about it, too.
That year, it caused some fans to turn on him in spite of his on-screen alignment. Yes, this was a step too far for a good percentage of people. And so it meant that when Shane then went on to team with the babyface Miz for a while, rather than the obvious twist playing out where the Miz, one of the more natural heels in wrestling, turned on his partner and returned to the dark side, it would instead be Shane O'Mac who did this, as by that point no one was interested in...
I ain't gonna lie, this was one of Miz's best face runs right here.
...cheering for him anymore. Obviously then, this led to a somewhat odd dynamic at WrestleMania 35 as Mike Mizanin was presented as the good guy fans were supposed to get behind in the face of a dastardly villain, with that being a part of the reason why the whole thing didn't really get over with the live crowd. Would it have worked better with Miz as the heel? Probably, and that might have even been the original plan. But no one was going to cheer for a babyface Shane McMahon in early 2019, so because of that then, he can't be considered anything less than someone who got the exact opposite reaction of what was intended, at least when he was a good guy during the latter 2010s. But then, as we've seen today, he's not alone in this, as there are plenty of examples of such a thing taking place across wrestling's long history, and there likely will be a lot more as the years go on.
I'd say we kind of doing right now. Hopefully, it's just overseas situation from Cody as well too, though. Although Cody kind of dealt with it in AEW, let's hope it's not deja vu with that. That's all it is as well too. But other than that, though, there you have it, though. The bizarre moment of wrestling where, sadly, the babyface, aka the good guy, the hero, are unfortunately disliked by fans for certain different circumstances, whether it's the first they did not want to be pushed as well too, or pushed too soon, the man who was pushed way too much because of his U.S. fan base, one who always get the main split by every time they come back, another one pushed too soon, I'm guessing, as well too, or the character was a little too cookie cutter around time where edgy was a thing. Like I said, it could have went with the Flex Kavana thing, or pushed at the wrong time, put in main event as the wrong place, the wrong time when he had another person in mind, and just males, the adult males hating on them, but the kids and women loved them, whatever. Just No, because this could have did without the cringy vignettes and all of that as well too. And again, wrong time and time, because it was like more so like it was time to be more rebellion. Rebellion was a thing, and what Brett was doing wasn't it. Bob Backlund again, it was like that. It was gone, and Tommy Dreamer was like, it's ECW. Extreme wasn't Extreme yet. It was like Easter Championship, but at the time they was heading towards that hardcore type, and he was like two of his pretty boys times well too, and Shane was just the wrong time for it. Other than that, what's your thoughts on these? Is there any other moments that, unfortunately, the person who was supposed to be the love hero or everything got hated by fans? Comment down below. And your whole thoughts on the first, on Babyface being hated while the heroes being loved. Your thoughts on those situations. I know someone will say you should do. I know people want me to do the hill being loved thing. I'm really gonna be reluctant with that because I don't want to be contributed to the likes of Hill being like, man. But other than that, if you like more reaction, like, share, subscribe to my YouTube channel. It's your boy T-Beer Son, and all for one love.